Bank Studios. This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson. America First with Sebastian Gorka. Today at 3, right before Sean Thompson at 4 on AM 560. The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. JP Sears is a comedian and social media influencer. We've presented his stuff to you before. One of my favorites, JP Sears, dons the hat of the anthropologist. And, you know, we had a lot of pretend epidemiologists over the last 3 years during COVID. We might as well have some pretend anthropologists, and he does a pretty good job pulling it off. He detailed, documented, investigated, it's a real deep dive, the evolution of the woke. Take a listen.
Hi, welcome to the Science Channel. From an evolutionary perspective, woke people are the strongest, most capable form of hominoids history has ever seen. They're superior human beings. I'll explain what makes the woke apex predators on top of nature's food chain, but first, you have to understand, woke people didn't just appear overnight. In simple terms, evolution is what we do at a genetic level to win the competition of survival against other forms of life in nature. Now, evolution takes time, so to take a look at the woke's earliest human ancestors, we need to rewind the clock back about 10 years to the pre-Paleowokolithic era. Back then, you had a primitive people known as Homo sapiens. These were a type of hominids who survived using primitive skills such as strength, bravery, intelligence, and productivity. And interestingly, their species only had 2 genders. Then midway through this era, just after the world ended because of climate change according to Al Gore, the Homo sapien developed into Homo sapien justicus, or commonly referred to as social justice warriors. They were the first pre-woke ancestors who originated online hatred. It's believed they understood fire, and they also learned how to make weapons out of keyboards. And they began mating primarily with their own hands while staring at computer screens. That led us to the current Paleowokolithic era that created the conditions for the Homo sapien non-binary woketicus to develop and thrive, or commonly referred to as the woke. They're a very advanced phylum of people who have evolved to shed what are now unnecessary prehistoric qualities, like gills, large canines, and self-responsibility. And along with developing the ability to have an inability to tolerate even the slightest bit of discomfort, they've also evolved to develop 72 genders. Now, when we've studied the fossilized evidence of primitive people, we've discovered strong evidence that suggests they did all their thinking in their brains. Whereas the woke carry around additional brains in the form of devices like phones, tablets, and TVs, which is where all their thinking comes from.
Yeah, I remember the era 10 years ago where Homo sapiens roamed the earth. JP Sears did a little bit more, lab research too, just to confirm his findings.
Darwin's theory of evolution is survival of the fittest. Yet to better understand the genetic development of the woke, our scientific analysis of stool droppings from Hollywood celebrities, along with carbon dating Molotov cocktail shrapnel from downtown Portland, has proven that what's more true than survival of the fittest is survival of the outraged. Whereas those who archaically lived peacefully, productively, and lovingly have simply died off because they weren't fit to survive.
I tell you, you have to follow the science. And he did. JP Sears joins us now, and we want to talk, nice segue, about his involvement in a new film, the Real Anthony Fauci Movie. JP Sears, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Dan, thank you for having me on, and I appreciate you exploring the science this morning.
Yeah,
well, he's a science and data type of guy. That's how he rolls,
That's
JP.
what I do. That's just what I do, JP. And, by the way, I love your bedside manner, too, because it's very Bob Ross. I'm thinking of, like, happy little trees on canvas while you're talking about the evolution of the woke. I just love the mannerisms.
Oh, thank you. I love Bob Ross. I've never really seen that parallel, but now that you mentioned it, I can see it a little bit. I love that.
So tell us about the Real Anthony Fauci movie.
Yeah, just like with the comedy clip you just played, what I've tried to do with my comedy over the past few years is expose little grains of truth through comedy, having people have a laugh and a good time as it happens. But at the core of what I'm trying to do is expose a lot of truth, and there's really serious stuff going on. So I just became the biggest fan of this movie, the Real Anthony Fauci Movie. It certainly takes a serious approach rather than comedic approach, and it more than any other film in my lifetime, it exposes more hidden truth, exposing corruption, lies that actually impact us every day. And the movie, it's based on Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s best-selling book called The Real Anthony Fauci. It's got thousands of references taken from the government's own database. And what the film helps portray is the corruption that's been going on not only the past few years that a lot of us have noticed in the COVID era, but for even decades before, with different government agencies being captured by corporate interests, and then policies come down and they affect your and I's everyday lives. So lastly, I'll say there's an old saying, the truth shall set us free. And you can't get out of the jail you don't know you're in. And I think this film, the Real Anthony Fauci Movie, it exposes so much truth, and it helps set us free from a disempowered way of living that forms the jail that we didn't know we're in.
Well, speaking of jail, weren't you arrested in an anti-vaccination protest? And are you featured in this film, or how did you get involved in the project?
Great question. I love that you would think I was arrested. No.
You weren't arrested.
Like,
No.
JP, you just seem like a low-life degenerate.
Oh, no.
But no,
No, it's a badge of honor. Come on.
We assumed you've been arrested. Yeah.
I know what you mean. But no, I was never arrested. I took part in the March Against the Mandate rally at Washington, D.C. It was very peaceful, no arrests, but I'm very much proud to stand on the side of human rights and freedom. But my involvement with the film, I'm in it just a small snippet at the end, and my role is not anything significant or valuable. I'm just a big fan of the film because it has a mission of empowering people with information that's really been, I would say, corruptly hidden from folks.
Now, I mean, just on the filmmaker here, or the basis of the film, Robert F. Kennedy's book. So, Robert F. Kennedy is problematic for me. I'm not a fan. I mean, this is somebody who has previously called for jailing what he calls climate deniers. So, he's a little all over the place. I'm also not, reflexively anti-vaccine either, although was opposed to how 95% of it was handled over the last 3 years. So, I mean, I know you're a right or libertarian-leaning guy as well. I mean, does the Robert F. Kennedy as the messenger, or at least the source of the message, does that concern you at all?
It doesn't. Though, just like you said, Dan, I don't agree with all of his views on politics. I have a different view of climate change than Kennedy. But what I can say is I've had the opportunity to get to know him personally. I know his character. I know his heart is in the right spot. I know he's on a mission of serving people and exposing corrupt bureaucrats, corrupt industries. But I will say I've never met, whether it's a politician, obviously Kennedy is now running for president, or any kind of leader where I agree with 100% of their stances. So I've done my best to check my disagreement with Kennedy over certain issues as he tackles this specific issue of our freedoms being eroded and corporate corruption and the film The Real Anthony Fauci. But I certainly get what you're saying for sure.
What's the, when, in the film, what do you think people should key in on? What are maybe the topics that are tackled in a way they haven't been tackled elsewhere that really should be informative for people, something they should really take away, think about, share, discuss?
Well, the abstract takeaway is how we've given our power away by not knowing what's going on. We've kind of consented to a model of corruption. We've endorsed it. We've helped usher it along. we've given our power away because we haven't really known what's actually going on. So that's the biggest overarching takeaway. And I'll tell you, for me, what shocked me the most was learning about the decades-long history of Anthony Fauci's devious dealings dating back to the AIDS epidemic in the mid-1980s. I thought I knew about the guy, and I've never been a fan about Fauci. I had my own views of his corruption, but my mind was just blown just seeing what he's been involved in since the 1980s, and then the COVID era with what Fauci was doing was the same playbook. And I think even more important than understanding the underbelly of Fauci and what he's actually done, I think is understanding this is the system. Yes, Fauci is now technically out of the system, but what matters is the system that's been in place. It's a breeding ground for people that are out for their own interests, their own monetary agenda, and whatever other agendas they might have. So the system that we have of, healthcare, government taking care of us, mandates, it's a system that I don't think is really in line with true American values.
How do you react to people that are calling for quote unquote COVID amnesty? I'm not talking about amnesty for the shot callers at CDC or NIH or
Sure.
at the federal level. I'm talking about, amnesty from those who maybe were a little bit more aggressive and vituperative and intolerant than they should have been when people's kids were being held back from attending school and they were being imposed upon to get a mandate lest they be fired, and it's all of what happened that you experienced along with us. What do you say to just sort of the everyday Americans that are calling for COVID amnesty? Let's just put all this ugliness behind us.
Well, I'm not a fan of amnesty with this because history will repeat itself unless we learn the lessons. And we've learned some very painful lessons. We've seen people with really painful behavior, hurtful behavior, and to just call amnesty on that, I think, is to not learn the lessons that we've experienced over the past few years. But although I'm not a fan of amnesty, I am a fan of compassion and understanding. So while I think people should always be held accountable for their actions, rather than just screaming at their neighbors saying, you should be in jail, mine won't work if you don't have yours, that kind of thing. I think we need to have understanding and compassion for people because, one, anybody who was acting like a lunatic, they were truly a scared person.
Right.
They were functioning from fear. And I don't know about you, but I know a lot of people over the past few years who have slowly woken up and changed their stance. Oh. And they said, I was one of the guys screaming at people, shaming people for, not complying the way I wanted them to. And when I see somebody change their mind, I don't want to be divided against them. I think at a community level and certainly a national level, we need unity. We don't need division. So I don't think it's right to hold a grudge, but I think it is right to hold people accountable.
And your videos during that time, though, were so helpful about masks. I mean, what was your favorite parody that you did?
Oh, thank you, Amy. My favorite one, did you happen to see the video I did on life jackets?
Yes.
So that video, I'm using life jackets as a metaphor to represent the mandates and, portraying the lack of logic of the mandates. My life jacket won't work unless you have yours on, and,
right.
Everybody's at risk of drowning here on dry land. So that was very special to me because I feel strongly about freedom as a fundamental right of Americans. I saw mandates as an erosion of freedom, and yet being able to speak that message on YouTube and big tech, it's a highly censorable message, unfortunately, but I was able to find a way to do it by using life jackets as a metaphor.
He is JP Sears, comedian, social media influencer, and a proponent of the new film, The Real Anthony Fauci Movie. talking about the reckoning for COVIDians and the system that produced all the mandates to some extent, while also being compassionate, allowing people room to come over to our side, which is always intelligent. Yes. JP Sears, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate you having me on. I love the term COVIDians. I'm going to have to use that.
Please.
And by the way, the film is available to watch for free for a limited time at the Real Anthony Fauci Movie.com if people want to consider it and think for themselves about it.
All right. Very good, sir. Thanks, JP.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
It's like a